All right, let's get started. Hi, you guys. Seems like it's been a little while since I've had a chance to check in with you, so I wanted to get back with you. I'm working my way through the essays. Um, if I look tired, I am tired. And I'm sure some of you are feeling the same way. It's that point in the semester, I'm reminded. But I'm a little better than halfway through them, so next week you'll have my scores and comments. Um, the main concern I had with many of the essays was lack of references and scholarly articles to support your arguments. And part of that, I think, is due to the strange nature of the fairy tale. And I think some of you are beginning to find that when you're trying to make an argument about where these moral lessons come from in these stories, right? Um, because many of the tales that we're familiar with contain both pagan, that is, pre-Christian symbols or images. For example, the Cinderella, the different versions of Cinderella. In the Grimm version, I believe you have the magical tree, and in the Perrault version, you have the fairy godmother, right? So you have a magic tree on one hand that has the power to give dresses and slippers, and then the other you have the fairy godmother. Even the fairy godmother herself is a bizarre character, right? In the Christian traditions of baptism, the rite, there's a godmother and a godfather involved in the baptismal rite. But this particular godmother, she carries a magic wand with her. So there's a bizarre mixture of, a Christian imagery and symbol of this God person, this parent, this sponsor to sponsor a person in this religious faith, and a magic wand. So that's very bizarre, right? Magic and Christianity in the same tale. Um, there's a couple of you. I had warned, about sometimes it's better to stick with a very popular tale, and some of you took that as a challenge, I think, and found your own tales. Thinking about Mike Escobar read The Seven Ravens, and Said Lobo's The Mother. Both of these tales have these mythical elements, like the hero's interaction with elements of nature, like the sun or the moon or the stars or trees or lakes, and these natural objects in the world make demands on the hero, right? And now these kinds of mythical elements should be familiar with you, right? You've read the Popol Vuh, you've read the Egyptian cosmology, you've read the Kojiki. These are mythical elements. These are stories that we're familiar with. But when they're combined with these folk stories and settings, that also add this fairy tale element, the talking animals and the once upon a times and the princes and the princesses, you can see how complicated these stories really are, right? They seem very simple, but when you start analyzing them and discussing them, they become more complex than you believe. And I think one of the things that you might want to consider is, and this is something that I've learned over time, and especially with this class and some of the stories that you're writing about, I can really see very clearly as in these different genres that we've been studying. Origin stories, sacred texts are a genre of their own, but even within those they contain, genres, subgenres, poetry, parable stories, etc. And some of you have noted that. Um, these reflect historical changes in societies and cultures, right? Going from a pre-Christian, a pagan, very superstitious view of the natural world, as well as the social world, towards a more secular. And certainly in our modern versions of these stories, these are very secularized stories, right? Many of these mythic elements or these religious elements are being de-emphasized. And so I think it's helpful for you to sort of understand that that's what you're seeing too as you're analyzing and discussing. And I know some of you have noted this. Elizabeth Harris' essay in talking about Little Red Riding Hood, for example, talked about the changing stereotypes for the character of the wolf and our understanding of the wolf as a character in tradition. I thought that was wonderful, and it also gives me encouragement to encourage the rest of you too, to when you pick out certain elements, to focus on those and you can find some new things out for yourself as well. And I had to laugh when I was reading Elizabeth's essay, because one of my favorite retellings of the Little Red Riding Hood story is Hoodwinked. And in the Hoodwinked movie, the wolf really complains about how he's being stereotyped as a wolf, right? And so he's naturally the villain. And it's a very clever and funny way of making explicit, about the stereotypes that these stories have about particular animals and particular figures and characters within the stories themselves. And that's a very modern element, to sort of mock the characters' self-mocking and the self-mocking of the story itself. So here's my suggestion. Keep reading more critical literature. Make your annotations, right, so you can complete step 3. 8 to 10 annotated references. Probably upwards of a half dozen of those should be scholarly, right? At least half, all right? And step 4 should basically be a copying and a pasting of step 1 and step 2. Step 1 at the beginning, that's the introduction to the story, the origins of the different versions and so forth, and the different parts, and how the new versions and adaptations are continuing to be made. The second, and I would even say you could do just a run one of those horizontal lines across your paper. Section 1. You could use headings and title it Origins of the Story. Section 2, the morals of the story. And then the final step, of course, is the conclusions that you've already begun to think about in step 2. That is about what is about the seeming secularization of these stories. How is that going to help or hinder the transmission of moral lessons in culture and society? And let's not forget, the vital function, and some of you have noted this, is about the entertainment value, right? These stories were always meant to entertain, as well as to teach. And that's the wonderful nature of these stories. When you have a story that is fun to read and you learn something, how cool is that, right? Which was part of the reason why I thought, gosh, to have a course, where you got to read fairy tales and get college credit for it should be good, right? Should be. I know that at this point in time you're thinking, maybe not so much, all right? But yeah, what about the contribution to our imagination, right? And the future of these stories, what do you think? So, just wanted to touch base with you. I'll catch up on scores and grading for just about everything, by the first of next week. And if you have questions or concerns, you want some further help on comments or suggestions I've made in your essay, please contact me. If you use my phone number, you might text me and ask me if I'm available to have a conversation, and I'll certainly, if I'm available, I'll certainly stop and be glad to talk with you. So keep going. We've just got a few more weeks to go, and it's all going to work out. See you later.